Philip. So today we are discussing Viz Big Volume 4. Is that right? 5.
Five, actually. Yeah.
Shoot, I can't keep things straight. Um, which are volumes 13 through 15 of the traditional volumes. Um, so much Musashi in this one, especially in the final two volumes, right? He was just all over this chunk.
Yeah. Well, this was an interesting one. I think it's a change of of narration in some ways because there's a lot of flashbacks,
Big
a
change.
lot of setup, a lot of. It seems like we're going into origin stories. This was the bind up of origin
Mm.
stories in many ways, which is setting up, I think, a lot of stuff for the future. But I also found these origin stories
Mhm,
to be really compelling and
mhm.
powerful and very revealing. I think thematically as well, where Inoue is probably going with all of this. So I thought it was
Yes.
great, really great stuff.
Yes, and while especially in volumes 14 and 15, we departed from who we're typically following and what we're typically doing, it all really still anchors back into those main themes and those main points, which has me excited for what's to come next. But in volume 13, we found out that Bakken, the new Bakken, we get to see him, his flashback and his origins. What did you think of his story?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, it's so tragic.
It's so tragic. That's exactly what the words I would have used.
I mean, I'm going to call him by his actual first name, which is Kohei, which his Chujikaze is the last name, and I probably just butchered that terribly. But Kohei is a character that we met early on. Recall in Musashi's adventures, he's the younger brother of the bandit that Musashi killed when he was still Takezo. Uh,
Mhm.
he seemed very upset at the notion that somebody killed his brother before he could, and now we know why.
Now we know why.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
had every reason to not like his brother.
yeah. His other brother, Tenma, I think was his name,
Mhm.
the bandit leader, older brother, who was quite a brute. Of course, their mother also, we learned, was not exactly motherly, was she?
No, not so much.
Yeah. Well, not I don't have any use for you, so boom over
Was it a not there any use though, or was it did she say that? Was that what she said?
kind of. I might be misremembering that a bit.
Maybe it's just the mom in me, but I read that very much as like maybe she's just really desperate. Maybe she just can't provide for them, can't provide herself, that sort of situation. But the
Yeah.
older brother certainly seemed to think that this was the wrong measure.
Yeah, I mean, we don't get much into her psychology. We don't get much into her story, but you have to think that she's gone through some trauma herself, and that's a thing, by the way. I mean, there are women who go through extreme forms of, say, postpartum depression,
Oh,
and
yes, absolutely
yeah,
true.
that's a thing. So, I mean, what
Absolutely.
she we don't get too deeply into it, but I found myself
Mhm.
wondering, whoa, what happened to this woman?
Right.
There's no father in the picture at all, it seems. So it's,
Right. And we don't know how these children came about, if she
right?
chose to be a mother or not. This is a very brutal world. So, not that that would justify throwing your child in the water, of
No,
course.
no.
But yeah, we don't know about her. But we will never will because she gets run
Right.
through right away.
Yes, she's taken care of pretty quickly, and it's interesting because initially you might think, "Oh, Tenma's a nice older brother," but what we learn is more tragedy that he actually had very selfish and um, twisted motives for preserving his brother's life. So he's an abuser. He's a sexual abuser, and we find out. And I think it's interesting because anyway handles this fairly subtly in this. I think. I mean, there are definitely there's rape on the page at times, but in terms of how Tenma abuses Kohei as when Kohei's a boy, it's not shown directly. It's fairly subtle. It's in a look. It's in a
It's very delicately handled.
Delicately handled. Also, one of the most touching and tragic moments in this whole section is when Kohei has killed the bandit whose name he takes over, Baiken.
Hmm.
And there's this little girl, Rindo, and he ends up somehow on top of her. And
Yeah, they were
she
kind of scuffling and
ends
lost
up scuffling,
themselves.
yeah, and he ends up on top of her and she flinches, and you realize, oh my God, she's been abused too. And he realizes that and says, oh, you thought I was, and you realize his history.
Hmm.
You have these two victims of sexual abuse
Hmm.
coming together, and suddenly their bond makes a whole lot more sense and becomes a lot more touching and compelling. That whole scene was like, whoa, okay, this is powerful stuff here.
Yeah, and with him having killed Bakken, the first Bakken, and he essentially released her from being subservient to her abuser, right? And so now they developed a companionship. It is interesting to me that he took on her abuser's name and she was
Yeah,
still able to have that connection with him, which I
yeah,
understand why he took on this person's name and continued his identity this way. That makes sense to me. It just looking at it from her perspective, the fact that she could get over that hurdle and develop this very strong bond with him.
yeah. Very great observation. And I don't know. She doesn't say a lot. We don't get
No.
her voice necessarily in here. It is. I think the motivation is probably he's trying to leave behind his life because of something to do with that scar, and I think
Hmm.
it's fairly clear that it's a connection to the next couple of volumes that he got
Hmm.
that scar from Kojiro Sasaki, who has grown up and delivered that scar. I imagine we're going to find out exactly how, but it seems like
Hmm.
that's where he got that facial scar.
Hmm.
So that's a sort of connection between the 13 and the next two in a sense. But even without that, there's a thematic connection here with the origin story. But yeah, it's just really powerful stuff. And of course, the main event of Volume 13 is the standoff between. Uh, uh, I keep wanting to call him Baiken, but I'm using his real name, Kohei, and
Kohei, yeah.
Musashi, right? So what did you think of that, the standoff between the two, and what actually ends up happening there?
Yes. So it is pretty interesting because at first, when he gets wrapped around the neck with the chain, and he goes, "How could I have allowed myself to enter into a fight that I wasn't prepared to?" What does he say? I wasn't prepared to engage myself in, which I his own play, which we've kind of talked about in the last one of how much he's changed. Whereas before, it was he kind of launched himself into any fight, threw his whole life on the line for it and accepted that death was a factor. And here, he's not ready to engage in this fight, and he's really not interested in fighting someone that could overpower him. He actually has value for his life now. But Rindo steps in. And the whole scuffle with Matahachi stepping in and like all of that, and then he runs away. What did you think of all that? Because that was wild. That's not how I expected things to go.
Yeah, Matahachi still disguising himself,
Uh
trying
huh.
to cover up his own true self, true to form,
Hmm.
and running away. That's what he does best,
That's what he
right?
does. That's all he does.
Yeah. And of course, Musashi doesn't recognize him. So we're building towards something here between these two eventually uh, reuniting in some form or other. But yeah, Matahachi's little cameo, I guess, in this bind up that's the only time we saw him, and just seems like he's still running and ridiculous and trying to prove himself and botching it badly every time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he
I
tries
want to
to,
under.
and he
Sorry.
throwing the knife too at the
Right.
portal, and then having Kohei step in the way of it.
Mm-hmm.
That was a powerful thing too, I thought, because you see
Big
how
time.
protective he is of this little girl he's trying to save himself in a way by saving this girl because of
Yeah.
their bond having been through similar trauma, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and he does get his fingers cut off,
Yeah,
which so he gets his fingers cut off. He's got this wound. He's dying, and he has relief. He's
yeah,
pleased. I can't hold a sword anymore, which means that I'm no longer beholden to this bringer of death nature that I have, which is I found that very interesting because obviously he's very much like Musashi. Musashi's starting to break free of the beastly nature, starting to have a deeper understanding. Seems like he had that deeper understanding and had changed, but was pulled back into becoming a beast when he's met with someone of the same nature.
yeah,
And when that opportunity removed from him, when he was no longer able to be a beast, he was relieved. Now I don't have a choice. Now I have to be someone who I'd rather be. And I have to live this life with this girl that I'd rather be living. And it's almost like I can't escape this on my own. So now that the choice has been taken from me, I'm so glad that I don't have to live this life anymore. You know what I mean?
yeah. Beautifully said. And it does link again to the next section, which we're going to talk about, of course. But you have a figure who's done with life, who finds purpose in raising a younger person as well when we get to the volumes 14 and 15. So it's a nice
Mhm.
little foreshadowing, if you will, a nice
Mhm.
little parallel that you have there, finding purpose in protecting this younger life, even though he feels done with life, because I think partly because he was shown up by someone superior, Kojiro, who scarred him, who transformed him, who transfigured him into, that vibrancy is gone from Kohei. He was this very, very vibrant, alive when we knew him in the first section. Uh,
Mhm.
he was coming after Takezo. And I thought that something happened to this poor guy that sucked the life out of him. And it must have been that encounter, because he realized, okay, I'm not the greatest. And it's interesting because it does happen to as well. The mentor figure, Jisai, kind of, oh my gosh, Kanamaki, Jisai. I'm just gonna call him Jisai.
Yeah, Jisai is good.
Similar thing. He's shown up by somebody superior, and he realized,
Mhm.
okay, my whole life was the way of the sword, and I was defeated by somebody superior. I'm not what I thought I was, and he's kind of just desolate as a result. And it's interesting because he takes up the chain and the sickle. Uh,
Mhm.
Instead, it's almost like, yeah, somebody showed me up with a sword, so now I can't really, And of course, he does lose his fingers as well. So just a tragic figure. And he also, I feel like, is what Musashi could have been, right? He's even more tragic than Musashi. As tragic as Musashi is, he has a chance of transcending the beast. He has a chance at becoming a better human being. I don't think that Kohei had the same opportunities. I think he's a kind of a even more tragic figure. They have a lot in common, but poor Kohei was even worse off, I think, than Musashi. Do you agree with that?
Um, it's hard to say because we got such an elaborate backstory for Kohei, and we have such brief little flashes for Musashi.
True.
But Kohei was raised to be an abuser. He was taught the ways of pillaging and raping and stealing and, well, that's pillaging, and brutalizing, harming people. And as a little boy, we watch him do it,
Yep.
which is just devastating. So devastating that this child was raised to think that this is what we do.
Right.
Um, and we know Musasha was also raised in a very abusive home, in a very distant, isolated home, but we don't know the extent of what happened to him. But
Mm,
based off of the information that we have, yes, I would say that Kohei had less. It makes sense that he wanted to completely abandon his identity, abandon his old self, and start fresh because he didn't really have a chance in the beginning. And now he's choosing to get his chance by shaking all that off. It is interesting that he was raised to be an abuser and he killed an abuser and took on that abuser's name and redeemed it in a way
yeah.
for the child that was being harmed by him.
Yeah.
Uh, Yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting. I expect though that as we learn more about Musashi, we're not going to stop seeing sad things.
I suspect you're right. Yeah, I do. But I also think that Musashi has at least the potential for enlightenment, that
Oh yeah,
he's on a path now where if he stays on that path, he doesn't have to become as tragic as poor Kohei has become here.
Kohei, yeah.
Yeah.
I think too, Kohei is um, someone who tried to escape his beastly nature and couldn't entirely. He was drawn back into it, but he wants to have a better life for himself. And it's interesting to watch them walk away from that fight because Kohei had uh, begged for his life. Please help me. I need to take care of this girl, right?
Yeah.
And Musashi walking away and saying, "Would I be able to plead for my life to an opponent who would just I to do that in order to protect someone I care about?" And seeing someone who had a very similar struggle and is on a similar path who has been able to create relationships when Musashi has continued to push his relationships away and starts pondering how much he misses them and could I do this for them? And I think we're gonna circle back to that. I think eventually he's gonna be faced with that question in a much more physical sense, and we're gonna see him, I hope, do exactly that for the people that he loves.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. I hope so. Yeah.
Anyway, you were trying to talk about about Jinsei.
Oh, about who?
About him, another man who's lived his life by the sword, another man who is
Yes. Yeah.
Jisai.
Jisai. Yeah. Jisai. Yeah. Maybe.
Jisai.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
As long as we're consistent with each other, so we don't confuse
Yeah.
people, it should be okay.
We'll get it
Um,
eventually.
Yes, Jisai, you brought him up as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, another man who lived his life by the sword, who gave everything that was in him for this, and found it very unsatisfying, found it unfulfilling, and found himself at the end of it all saying, "This was my life is worthless," essentially.
Yeah, yeah. And that was something that he was faced with when he was defeated by Ito Hai, who,
Mhm.
by the way, another real historical figure. If you read the
Oh,
back,
really?
yeah, yeah. Actually, most of these people are not all, I think, but they're mentioned in the very. Again, I'm just going on the back page at the end of every one of these bind ups. You have this back page that tells you the history a little
And
bit.
I need to start reading those. I when I get to the end, I just kind of, like, skip on to the next thing. I don't even look at what else is there.
Yeah, so he's a real dude, Itosai, who was like apparently like one of the most important schools of sword fighting was founded by this individual. He gets like a cameo in here. Apparently, he studied for a little while, perhaps under Jisai and his school, but he got in the story he got too good, and he beat everybody, including Jisai, and he's kind of perceptive as well. Even though he's a bit of a bully in here, he's a perceptive bully because he's the one that tells him that this little boy you're raising is deaf, and he's like, "Oh, 3 years go by, and he doesn't." He does have that one moment where he's like, "How come you're not talking yet?"
Mhm.
But
Yeah. He definitely is in over his head with this sweet little boy.
yeah, yeah. Jisai is not what you would think of as a good potential father figure.
Yeah, he does do his darndest, though. He really commits himself to raising him. The implication is that he once had a son, Kojiro, who wasn't able to live. He was killed in one way or another, which is why he put that name on this other child.
Yeah, I mean, Kojiro is, of course, this child washed up on the shore from the boat, and it's never entirely clear if Kojiro is the child mentioned in the letter. We're not sure, are we?
Right,
Right?
right. I
His former
assumed.
Yeah, I mean, I did too. It seems like that's probable, but I mean, can you imagine? It's kind of coincidental too, I suppose. But
Sure, sure.
there he gets the letter. He's waiting for the boat or whatever, so
Mhm.
it's probable. But we don't know for sure because no one knows that no one survived except for the baby.
Right.
And it's really an endearing story because Jisai constantly is like doubting himself. He's bringing this baby to the neighbor's house to like abandon the baby because I can't handle this, and then he gets breastfed, and then he's like, no, I gotta go back. I can't.
Give me back my child. Yeah, he even throws because the child is so attached to the sword that's way too big, way too heavy, all wrong. And he's like this. He clings to it, and so he surrenders the child, and then he surrenders the sword, and then just can't. Dives back in the water, runs back to his son. He's like, "This is my kid. Give him back." And the parents are just like, "Okay, we didn't ask for him."
I
But
mean, it's funny, but it's also a really good example of conflict within a character.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, very true. The one thing that when you brought up that he said, "This kid's deaf," how did you not notice this, right? And it kind of draws back to what keeps coming back up, which is you're blind to everyone but yourself, which is the struggle that Musashi is having, that kind of selfishness, that inward looking, not being aware of what's happening in the world around you, which I thought was cool. Is definitely we're getting a lot of good tie-ins with this, even though we're completely removed from what we've been doing.
Great call, Murphy. Yeah, that's a really good one. And I love the cover of that particular panel. It's so cute. It's this little kid, and then and it's even more endearing once you've read it because you realize what a mess this poor fellow is.
Mm-hmm.
What a mess he is, and how.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess we all have that too, to some degree. Like we struggle with life to be our best, whoever we can be, and we realize so often we fail. And he's just so disillusioned and sad, and at the same time, you love him because he tries.
Mm-hmm. He does. He tries. I'm sure you can kind of relate as your parent as well. There are times where somebody is like, "No, you did that all wrong." And you want to go out and start slicing water with your sword. You just want to start. How did I not see this? How did I mess this up so badly?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think every parent has that moment where you realize I really could have done a lot better here, and how much damage did I do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those big oversights that it's just like, how did I not see? Yeah, and so I could understand his frustration, and he just kind of ran back to the only thing that he really knows how to do, which is
Yeah.
the sword, and released all that frustration there. And those panels of Kojiro mimicking his father, doing those motions, you can see how in tune he is with the art of the sword, and how connected he is, not just to that sword itself, but to the art
Yes. Yeah.
form that he's so desperately wanting to learn, and that his father is so desperately trying to keep him from.
Yeah, absolutely. And he is very conflicted in that as well, because he realizes that somehow this baby's connection with this sword is just really important, and that it's a very
Which is exactly what he doesn't want him to have.
yeah, exactly, and what he's trying to run away from in himself as well. So there's a lot of layers to that, I think, that are really interesting. But
Your favorite character comes back.
Yes, I love the Takun cameo. Yes. So more and more, it seems evident to me that Takun is a stand-in for Takehiko Inoue. That he sort of comes onto the scene, shows his face, gives a little bit of wisdom.
Yep.
Observes. He's an observer. He's a bit like Chaucer in Canterbury Tales, being one of the characters present while the pilgrims are going, but he's like an observer the whole time as well. So yeah, it just seems like he is definitely an author stand-in. Do you think?
I think so. He's going to be our reoccurring wisdom bringer, and he just happens to know everybody. He just happens to be a little bit more enlightened, and he can He knows where to go when he's needed, and he arrives when that time comes. I kind of love that character type though, so I'm not mad about it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm definitely here for the Takuan cameos. So
Yes.
I'm smiling whenever he shows up.
I know. I was so excited when I turned the page and I saw his face. I was like, "Ah, Philip's gonna be so happy."
Yeah, that was me. Yeah. Yeah, there's some and great character moments in here. I thought, okay, so I think I know what's going on now. I want to get your take on this. So the
Go.
kid, I forget his name, but the kid who is initially kind of a bully,
His
uh,
disciple.
yeah, and ends up Kojiro's disciple, like treats
Hmm.
because Kojiro beats him up, and he's like, "How are
Hmm.
you so strong? I got to learn
Hmm.
from you."
Hmm.
We figure out who he is, I think, because of the scars he's given by the creepiest character I've ever read, Fudo. We got to talk about him
Oh,
later.
we'll talk about Fudo.
We got to talk about Fudo, but oh my God. So the scars he's given, he's the guy that Matahachi stole the certificate from. So he wasn't.
No, really?
I think so because those are the scars that guy had. So that guy who is the friend. He's not Kojiro, right? So because the kid is Kojiro who's deaf, right?
Yes.
So when Matahachi, that guy told Matahachi, look out for these people. They might try to kill me, and Matahachi failed. Uh, and he fought and killed like 5 dudes, but he was killed ultimately. But Matahachi took that certificate off of him and it had Kojiro's name on it. So Matahachi thought that that dude was Kojiro, right?
Okay.
But he wasn't Kojiro. He was Kojiro's friend, the kid who became Kojiro's disciple, right?
So I never, I
Yeah.
didn't
So
make that connection.
Matahachi thinks that Kojiro is dead, that he's taken his identity. Kojiro is not dead. He's the deaf kid has grown up and he's some like kick-ass swordsman somewhere. The guy who got killed was Kojiro's disciple who had the certificate.
No.
Yeah, I think so. Had the certificate. It's the scars that tip me off,
I
right?
never made that connection.
Yeah, because I went back and I looked and it's the same scar. So
Really?
the adult guy, that was Kojiro's friend who was his disciple, the bully who became the disciple. I wish I could remember his name, but he's the one who.
That's an incredible catch, Philip.
Well, it was the scars. I think that's where. Yeah, that was the big clue, right?
I know, but you remembered. There's so many characters, and there's so many scars, and
There's a
there's
lot
so
of
many
characters.
faces.
So, in other words, Matahachi's running around saying, "I'm Kojiro." Kojiro's still alive, and he's the one who gave, of course, Kohei his scar. And I have to think that Matahachi's going to meet the real Kojiro, whose certificate he's running around with.
Oh
And I
my
think
goodness.
we're getting a setup here. I think where Kojiro is going to be Musashi's main rival.
I think you're right,
Yeah,
or something. He's
yeah,
going to be something. He seems like it seems like we're finally getting an opponent or a
right.
conflict that is actually going to stay for more than a volume or two.
Yeah,
Because we've spent 2 volumes just building him up before he even meets Musashi, and
right.
there's already so many parallels between the two characters.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think that he's here to stay. He's
Yeah.
serving a purpose. I didn't make that connection though with Matahachi as well.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's amazing. That was such a good catch, Philip.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, Matahachi just assumed that the guy who was dead was Kojiro, but he's not Kojiro. He was
Yeah,
Kojiro's
he's
friend.
the disciple.
And
No
Kojiro's still
kidding.
he's doing his thing somewhere or other. We're gonna find out where he is.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, and Matahachi can't stay away from Musashi, so they're definitely going to be
Yeah.
coming back together and oh no! Oh no! And he's been misusing his name this whole time.
Exactly. And I feel like when Kojiro, it's possible that when Kojiro and Musashi become, if they do become main rivals,
Mhm.
Matahachi's gonna have some role in that, right? He's
Yeah.
he's gonna be the one who screws things up, right?
Absolutely. He keeps stepping in where he shouldn't and making mistakes. So yeah, he's absolutely, oh no, my boy, Matahachi, what
Yeah.
have you done?
Yeah, so that's what I think is going on here, but I'm 100% sure that the guy that Matachi stole the letter from, or the certificate of swordsmanship, was Kojiro's friend, not Kojiro, right?
Excellent catch, Philip.
Yeah.
Really excellent catch.
But
I've
it was a
never,
scar. It was what the scars that Fudo gave the kid.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yep. Yep. Okay. That does make sense. I knew those scars would be significant because it was such a scene for him to say, I don't want to kill a do this, teach you a lesson. And then he
Yeah.
grows up, and those are the signifier that, we're still with the same character after he's aged. So I knew that scars had some sort of significance, but oh man, that's a really good connection, Philip.
Yeah, I mean, scars seem to play a big role in this series, and they have meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in life, that's true, right? If you have a scar, you have a story. That's a part of
Sure.
who you are, and
Sure.
certainly with Kohei's scar, it changed
Mm-hmm.
the person, not just
Mm-hmm.
because of the physical disfigurement, but because of what it meant, his defeat there at the
Mm-hmm.
hands of, I assume, Kojiro, because he says his name, Kojiro, near the end of his part, near the end of 13. And then we
Mm-hmm.
transition to Kojiro's origin story, which is 17 years before that big battle where we met Matahachi and Takezo. So
Mm-hmm.
Kojiro's the same age, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
as Musashi.
As they are, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent observation.
Yeah. Well, once in a while, I mean, there's so many characters here.
Oh, I feel like I'm drowning in names and faces. So
Yeah.
ain't no way you're not going to catch me with that kind of observation.
Well, I might be completely wrong too. We might find out I'm just totally off in the next.
Probably not. That seems really right.
Yeah.
But anyway, we do meet Fudo, and yeah, so he was the savior of the town. He was
Yeah.
something, and
Yeah.
now he just them and harms them. So these people that Jisai, how did we decide that we were going to say his name?
Yeah. Jisai. Yeah.
Jisai.
Jisai.
These people that he's connected to because she breastfed Kojiro when he was a baby. Now their oldest is 14 years old, and that's the way of Fudo apparently is he just once a year he takes a young girl. Devastating for this family and for her and for anyone. So they're finally ready to try to take him down, but no one can, including but he's going to try and he's going to lose his life doing this. But we also have Gojiro and his best mate who have decided to take him down because of the other ways that he's harming people in like cutting off the friend's dad's arm.
Right.
How did you feel about all that buildup and everything that escalated to that moment?
Yeah. About Fudo. He's the creepiest character we've met in the series, so by a long shot. And there's something really awful in that he was a hero at one time. He was the savior at one time, and he became a monster. He became this. I mean, even the way he's presented is he's like this, like a zombie almost. Like he's no longer quite alive. But he must have been a great swordsman at one time. Even Jisai recognizes, wow, he could use that long sword with one hand. And realizes this guy, when he was young, must have been formidable. Probably had some other name and was famous, but now he's become a husk of a human being and an abuser instead of a hero. And it's interesting because there is a fine line there, and this is something you see a lot in older stories. The hero who saves people through martial means, through strength and weapons and killing, there's not a big line to cross there, because when you use violence to be the hero, you can easily become the monster. That's what's happened with this guy. He's become a monster. when
Hmm.
that's just, that's the nature. I think this is part of the exploration of violence here as a,
No, I completely agree with you.
yeah, yeah.
I completely agree with you. I think he may not have even viewed himself as the savior of this village. He
Mm,
may have just seen an opponent that he wanted to kill and killed him, to take what he had, to take his name possibly, whatever,
mm,
killed that person, and they started viewing him as the savior of their people, but he's never been a hero.
mm,
He's just been somebody who partakes in the violence of this world where if you want something, you kill and you take, right?
mm,
So now he's been put on this pedestal, but he's really not changed. He's just
mm.
cool. I want, I take, I harm, I
Yeah.
get what I want, right?
I want that sword.
Um,
I want that girl, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly,
Yeah.
and it certainly is possible that he's been corrupted. It's possible that he was a hero, and then he got jaded and lazy and washed up and whatever. You could say all that. But this world has shown that it's just very violent and brutal and dark, so it's certainly possible that he was just being that and never really was a hero.
Yeah. 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 I think that's actually a valid reading as well. Yeah. When we, and as long as we don't know his past, we're just
Mhm.
conjecturing that it's wide open in a way. Uh,
Yeah.
Boy, is
I
he,
wonder, do you think we're gonna get his past even though he's dead now?
it wouldn't shock me the way
Mhm.
we're getting so many backstories,
Mhm.
but I also feel like he's not that important. So maybe not. I mean, if we
Mhm.
did get his backstory, it would be another, example of, the kind of the ways in which living up to this masculine ideal can make a person into a monster,
Mhm.
and I think it really is a very, one moment you're the hero and the next you can veer easily into the monster because
Mhm.
violence is your means of solving everything.
Mhm.
You're going to be subject to, I mean, even you go back to all the classical myths and stuff like Hercules did some horrible things, including killing his own children, in a
Mhm.
bit of madness and berserker rage. That's a common theme, and the trauma, the PTSD, all of that stuff that is happens when you live a life of violence. A person can easily, I think, slip into something like that. But yeah, it's hard to
No, I
say.
agree. I
Yeah,
agree. And we do I think one of my favorite scenes is when Kojiro overpowered by Fudo, and it looks like he's going to be killed here, or his sword was stolen. So who knows what's going to happen, but it's not looking good. And his dad, who up to this point has said, I will fight him to the death, take care of my boy. And
yeah.
he's resolved himself, but he also keeps stopping on the road. He can't
Oh,
make himself do it,
yeah.
stopped by fear, stopped by whatever the reason. But when he sees his son in the path of Fudo, that's when he moves. That's when he knows. When he hears him calling out, he hears his scream. Yeah, that's that's what makes him have the strength to move. And it's them together that, or I guess it's mostly dad that does it. But like that really spoke to me. He truly loves this boy and he'll put his life on the line for the people in theory, but in action, it's for his boy.
Yeah, I think he would not have gotten through
I think
to
so
the point
too.
of mustering up enough courage to actually go through if it hadn't been for, oh, my child, I have to, and then it just instinct kicks in, his parental instinct is, he's just there, he's not even thinking anymore.
I agree.
Yeah, because he realizes how washed up he actually is, but when instinct takes over, I think his swordsmanship comes back in a way, and he's
Mhm.
able to take care of matters, though he loses the one arm, or the use of the one arm, because he's wounded pretty badly there. But it's interesting too, because this one act of violence in his case does result in a kind of restoration of his dignity. He's given
Mhm.
recognition by the villagers, which he isn't quite. He's like, I'm not what you think. I'm not your
Oh,
hero.
they
Right?
wanna make him their new savior.
Yeah.
And he's like, "I'm gonna go live in my shack. I'm good." Which yeah, that says a lot about about, again, where he's come from. He was a man living by the sword, and I do wonder if he had had this encounter when he was living by the sword, if he would have taken that, and if that would have all just circled back around again. But instead, he has something else to live for. He has his son to live for, and he's like,
Yeah.
"I'm not really looking for that position."
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And his dignity is back. He is teaching, which is good for him, though he can't use the one arm.
Mhm.
He's become a sensei in truth. I think that's a
People
beautiful.
trust him to be their teacher now where they once didn't.
They scoffed at him, called him
Yeah,
an old man and a lunatic, and all of that. So his little arc in here is one of my favorite things about the series so far. It's a beautiful little story
it
within
is.
the story, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I agree. It feels like we got, even though we didn't get his beginning, we got a beginning for him, right? The beginning of the end and the beginning of a new life.
Yeah.
And that came all the way around for him into a really satisfying, sweet story. He still doesn't want his son to learn the sword, won't even let him watch him train. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because Kojiro he's a natural. There's something in him that's meant for this.
Which is very similar to Musashi. We get
Absolutely.
another parallel here. There's just something in these people, and to some degree, I think others as well, like Kohei, is like that. But I see Kohei as just a little more tragic
I
and
agree.
a little more damaged.
I
Uh,
agree.
but I think that similarity is there's a naturalness to
Mhm.
them that elevates them above other warriors in a way. That
Yeah.
there's a it's not just physical strength, although that's there, but there's this kind of this 100% commitment
Mhm.
in the mind toward this goal, which is something you very rarely see. I mean, these are the very best athletes, the Michael Jordans or whatever of the world, who can achieve this level of superiority over everyone else in this realm, you know. And
Mhm.
there's just something that sets these people, something different about these people. So
Mhm. No, I agree. Another parallel with Musashi and Kojiro is the beast is certainly inside of Kojiro as well,
yeah,
and that comes out full force when Fudo
Udo,
is killed and and Kojiro just starts hacking away. Yeah, there's just a bloodlust in him. There's an excitement to participate in the killing,
yeah,
which horrifies his father. He pulls him away. He says, "Okay, that solidified what I already knew. You are not going to train in the sword. I
yeah,
don't want you to feed the beast. I don't want you to give into this. I have, and I know how unfulfilling it is, and I don't want that future for you. I don't want you to end up the way that I ended up." Um, it I am curious because when he pulled his son off of Fudo's body, the villagers who were also too afraid to fight came
right,
in and they gleefully started hacking at a dead body. They weren't defending themselves. They were gleefully indulging in the aftermath of death and participating in it, right?
yeah.
So I wonder if that's a commentary on there's a beast in every man. Just do you feed it or do you not?
Yeah, I think that's true. Also, I think this man, Fudo, had disempowered them. And
Mm,
they are ritually reclaiming their power by hacking apart his dead body.
mm,
That's there's there. It's a release of a sort, and it born out of hatred and a desire for vengeance. Probably not very healthy. And the only one who acts with dignity in that moment is Jisai, who you get the sense that he knows better than to hack apart a fallen opponent, right? So there is a kind of
yeah,
yeah.
and again,
Go ahead.
yes, Sorry, I think there was a lag. I didn't mean to talk over you.
Yeah, no problem.
Um, again, I think that if we had met him earlier in life when he was of the sword, he may have gleefully participated as well.
Yeah.
It's just that I think it's the aging and the humbling and seeing how unfulfilling the life is that he doesn't want to embrace that beastly side of him ever again. Um, which I feel like we've gotten so many different stages of that just in these 3 volumes. You know, we have I don't remember what his first name was, but the new Bakken. What
Oh,
was
yes.
his
Um, oh my gosh. Kohei.
Kohei, thanks. Yep, there it is. I couldn't scroll and find it fast enough. We
Yeah.
have Kohei who desperately wants to leave the life that was kind of forced on him, kind of, you know, he didn't really get to choose his path. We have him who's trying to forsake that, but can be pulled back into the beast, the bringer of death. And we have Musashi who's starting to learn, but keeps falling back, can't fully learn this lesson yet. We have a man who lived the life of the sword, found it completely unfulfilling, and has completely rejected it. And we have a young boy who is pulled to it
Yeah.
and feels like that's kind of his calling. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I think that this was very much these were setup volumes.
Yeah.
So a lot of meat there probably that people see that we don't see yet. And upon reflection, after we get to know him better and we see what role he's really going to play in the story, we may be able to look back at this and see new things. But
Yeah.
it's been a very interesting setup.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, you have a lot of, I think, foreshadowing, like that moment on the beach when Kojiro, as a boy, is picked on by the other kids.
Yeah,
It's heartrending
it
and
is.
tragic. But
Yes,
also then when he beats up the kids, including eventually the local tough
right.
kid, bully, who becomes his student, it's a little bit of a little kind of a mini Lord of the Flies moment there,
Oh, yeah.
right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
wow, human beings are violent and we tend to worship strength and brutality,
Mm,
and we, it's the strongest rule kind of thing.
mhm. The
And
leader is the one that makes us submit.
yeah, and it's sad, but then you have this spiritual element that is being injected into the series
Mhm,
as well, which is in opposition in many ways to this worship of strength and brutality. So it's going to
mhm.
be interesting to see how these things get resolved.
Yep. No, I completely agree. It's been a really fascinating journey, and I'm really looking forward to I mean, we've kind of already talked about where we expect this to go, that he's gonna be kind of a main adversary. He's around to stay, at least for a bit. You made that great observation about how Matahachi is gonna tie into all of it as well,
I
so,
think
I
so.
yeah, I think we have a lot of good content coming for us.
Yeah, yeah, I'm excited. This is setting up something really cool, I think. So
Mhm.
we'll see. We'll see.
Yes. So last discussion, we said that each volume just keeps last. Do you still feel that way with the fifth bind up?
I'm still trying to decide. I love the fifth bind up, and
Mhm.
for me, the fourth bind up was one where it bore the fruit was born in the fourth bind up from the work done in the previous ones in
Mm,
many ways, and I love the spiritual aspects of it. And I feel like in a way with the fifth bind up we're starting over in a way here.
that's a very true. That's a very good way of putting that.
Yeah, but I love the setup, and I think it's gonna bear fruit as well, and we're gonna
Mhm,
bring these together. So
mhm.
I'm pretty interested in seeing how that happens. Yeah.
That was a very polite way of saying it. It's still book 4. The fourth bind up is still my top. Big
Yeah.
time. This was a setup
Yeah.
section.
Yeah.
And a setup section is valuable, but I think a setup section can never be your favorite until you're on a reread. It can't be your favorite the first time. So I appreciate the groundwork that it's doing,
Yeah.
and I enjoyed it very much. But I the fourth bind up was S tier. That's a 10 out of 10. It'll be
Yeah.
hard to surpass that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to go back to Vinland Saga again, but it's no coincidence. Maybe it's the fourth Vinland Saga book where
Oh,
that arc, that first arc, is just wow. That's one of the best, in my opinion, of the Vinland Saga books. Is the fourth one
yeah, I
where
do agree.
that's the end of the first arc, and it's a
Yes.
really great end to that story. And then we
Hmm.
start over with the next arc, and it's kind
Hmm.
of what's happening. I feel like something similar is happening with this fifth one too. So
Yeah, I wonder if we did enter into a new arc here. I haven't been following along where the arcs start and end.
I have no clue.
But I think that's a good point, though. I think that 14 does feel like the beginning of a new arc. Like
Yeah,
15
14
was,
does. Yeah.
yeah, I think 12, sorry. 12 was climax of the arc that we've been in, and then 13 was the falling action of it, and then 14 is the beginning of a new arc. I mean, I could be wrong, but that is how it feels.
I agree. Yeah. If I were designating the arcs, that's where I would go to. Yeah.
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 Cool. Well, I think the next one is going to be a lot to discuss, so I'm really looking forward to it.
Same here.
Cool. So, for those watching, as always, Philip is linked in the description. The last discussion was on Philip's channel, and that last discussion was my favorite discussion that we've had to date, including everything that we've talked about ever. It was such a great time. So, if you haven't watched it, please do. It's on his channel, so go check it out. And make sure you're subscribed to Philip. And we'll see you again next week on Philip's channel on Tuesday.